We're ringing out the old and ringing in the new with Baby New Year and Father Time. Welcome to Up All Night DIY. I'm Monica. Thanks for joining me. Each year I make at least one New Year project, so I am so pleased to be co-hosting the New Year celebration and party time collaboration with my sweet friends, Dawn of Shabby Meets Bling and Jackie of Jackie Burns Creations. You'll find links to their channels and the playlist in the description box. Right, let's get into it. To create Baby New Year, we're using a 2.4 inch and a 1.9 inch foam ball. I got mine at the Dollar Tree. We'll create flat spots on both the top and bottom by tapping them on the table. This is going to make it easier to stack them and to keep them from rolling about while we're working with them. I'm going to be using Model Magic, but you can use any clay that you prefer. And I have here a plastic champagne glass. I got this at the Dollar Tree. They're in the party section and come in a 6-pack. We'll also need some acrylic paint. I'm starting with Ceramcoat Tawny. I'm going to mix this into a handful of clay, just a wee bit, and I'm going to knead it to blend the paint with the clay. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, this is a bit messy, but it's also therapeutic at the same time. At least I think it is. So the other thing is the final color is going to be slightly lighter than your paint color, so you want to be aware of that. We'll just keep working the clay until the paint is completely incorporated with it. It only takes a couple minutes. So now I'm going to roll out the clay nice and flat, and then I'm going to cut it into a more manageable size and wrap our foam balls. I fill in any bare spots with more clay, and I'm going to roll the balls as I go, both to ensure that the clay adheres to the foam and also to smooth it out. I forgot to mention that we're going to need toothpicks, so once we get both balls covered, I'll attach them to each other with a toothpick, stacking the smaller on top of the larger. We're going to want to fill in the gap between the two balls, so we'll roll a thin cane of clay, and we're going to wrap it around the area, pushing it in with our fingers. This is going to secure the head to the body. Using my ball tool, I'm going to roll over the seam of the new clay and merge it with the clay on the balls. I want it to be relatively smooth. This will get covered up, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but I want the ribbon I'm going to cover it with to lie nice and flat, so we're going for smooth. And if you don't have a ball tool, you can certainly do this with a paintbrush handle. I paint the lower half of the body white. This is Baby New Year's diaper. So I'm going to give this 2 coats. Okay, so I broke a toothpick in half. I'm going to use these to anchor his arms to his bodies. I'm just going to push those in the place where I want his arms to go. But first we're going to do his features before we put his arms on. So we'll get to that next. Okay. So now I'm going to roll a wee ball of clay. I'll cut that in half and I'll roll both of those halves into smaller balls to make his cheeks. I do it this way so that the balls are the same size. I find it's easier to get a more accurate size this way. So now we're just going to push those cheeks into place. And we're going to roll another wee ball for his nose and push that between the cheeks. Easy, right? Okay, on to his arms. So we're going to roll a thicker cane of clay for his arms, and I make sure that the ends are around it because, you know, these are going to be his hands. We're keeping all of the shapes simple and cartoon-like. We'll cut his arms to length. I just eyeball this and make any adjustments as needed. I slide his arms over the toothpick, and I'm going to incorporate it again by rolling over the seam. Now that he's done for the moment, we'll set him aside, and we'll work on his hat. I colored some clay with black paint, same as we did with the Tawny, and we're going to roll that flat and cut a circle for the brim of his top hat. We're going to need a thicker log of black clay to make the crown of his hat, so we'll roll that out, and I'm going to narrow one end to give it that cartoonish shape, a more exaggerated flare at the top, as you would see on a cartoon top hat. We're going to go with that. I pushed the brim of his hat onto the center of his head, and now I'm going to slide the toothpick down into the center of the brim, just like this. Now all we have to do is slide the crown of his hat over top of the toothpick. I'm going to make sure that it's adhering to the brim, just like that. We'll just adjust his brim a wee bit, however you see fit, you know what I'm saying? I'm going to roll over the seam. Here, I'm just using a tool handle, but again, whatever you have, you just want to kind of incorporate the clay that's already on there. I think this guy needs ears, so I flattened out a wee bit more of the Tawny clay. I'm going to punch a wee circle and cut that in half. And I'm going to push those little ears right onto the side of his head. I did make these a wee bit thicker so that I can manipulate them a little better. And again, I'm using the handle of my tool to just make sure that they're incorporated onto the clay on his face. And now we're going to set this guy aside to dry overnight. Okay, this guy's ready for some paint. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to dry brush his cheeks and nose. I'm using Ceramcoat Sun-Kissed Coral for this and a stiff bristle brush. I get a wee bit of paint on my brush and I'm going to scrub the majority of it off onto a paper towel so that there's just a hint of that paint on the brush. And I'm just going to brush right over top of his cheeks and his nose. I start out lightly and I build the color to the depth that I want. With a detail brush and raw sienna, I'm going to give him little eye lines. They're just little lines that have a dip in the middle. Kind of look like the birds you used to draw when you were a kid. You know what I'm saying? Little seagulls. Yeah, the dip is in the center. That lets me know where his eye will go. So now we're also going to paint in his mouth with the raw sienna. And I'm just giving him a happy wee smile. And he's going to get a curl right here in the center of his forehead. I come back and fix this curl, but I don't think I show you. That curl's a little jacked up. I'm also going to give his ears some little cartoon ear detail. There you go. See? Now I'm going to float in some shading. So I'm dipping my brush in Folk Art Floating Medium. It's a clear gel, and I'm going to side load with raw sienna. I'll stroke my brush on the plate. This will blend the medium with the paint in the bristles, and it'll give me a gradient of color. See, it fades from dark to light. So I'm going to hold the paint corner of my brush where I want my darkest shadow. We're going to start here along his ear, and I'm holding the paint corner right where his ear meets his face. And I'm just going to stroke along, laying down that shadow anywhere where I feel there would be a natural shadow. Does that make sense? Yeah, so I'm doing around his ears. I'll go around his neck, a little bit around his arm, where his body and diaper meet. Again, anywhere there might be a shadow. I'm going to add some shading to his diaper with Ceramcoat Drizzle Gray. I loaded my brush the exact same way, and I'm just going to float along right where the diaper meets his body. Now I'm going to come in with some black paint and shade his top hat. And because when I mixed the black paint with the clay, I kind of took it down a notch to maybe more of a charcoal color, it allows me to use the black paint to shade because the black is still slightly darker. You feel me? Using the handle end of my paintbrush, I'm going to dip dot his eyes right there in the center of those little dips with some black paint, keeping it simple. I'm going to come in with the black paint and fill in his mouth and give him some eyebrows. With the point of a toothpick, I dot white highlights in his eyes, on his cheeks, and his nose. I'm going to use some Decor Art multi-purpose sealer to give him a top coat, and I'm going to use a cosmetic sponge to pounce it on. I'm using Fabric Fix to attach a sweet little black and white striped ribbon around his hat as a hatband. I'm going to use that same ribbon as a collar, so another bead of fabric glue around his neck and a little strip of that ribbon, and we're good. I have here some black and white harlequin ribbon. I'm going to scrunch that up. We're going to make him a big old bow tie. So I'm just going to wrap a piece of pipe cleaner around the center and twist it so that we get a big fancy bow tie. We're going to fluff it open. Kind of has a fan thing going on. I think it's cute. I attach his bow tie to his collar with a dot of hot glue. I'm going to make some doodads for his hat. So I have here a piece of silver or pipe cleaner. I'm just going to curl it around a paintbrush handle. There we go. I'm going to fold that in half. But first, before I glue this on, I want to attach a little Happy New Year sign that I just printed this out on cardstock. I'm going to add it right here, slightly cocked off to the side. Just using a little hot glue for that. Now for the pipe cleaner, just a little dot of hot glue should do it. Now with hot glue, I'm going to add some of these little silver glittered foam balls. Got these at the Dollar Tree, again in the party section. They're these bowl filler type things. And I like to add the silver balls because it reminds me of the ball drop in Times Square. You know what I mean? And also, I have this kind of embellishment on previous designs that I've made for my New Year's collection. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some of this clear jot glue. It's just school glue that I got at the Dollar Tree to the champagne glass. And we're going to add a little glitter. So I'm going to fill the neck of the glass with some of this glue. And I'll mix in some of the glitter that I have. This glitter is a mixture of gold stars, iridescent, and silver glitter. So I'm just going to stick that in there. Kind of mix it up a little bit so it looks like it's floating. Give it a champagne look. Right, so the next thing I did was add more glue, figuring this would help him stay in place, and I added some glitter to this. However, I'm going to advise against this because what started to happen after day 2 is that glue started to eat away at the clay. So what I would say to do is just maybe add some of the glitter to the champagne glass just to give it that look. Skip the glue. I would just use maybe some fabric glue on the bottom of his butt and attach them to the glass that way. So you see me here setting them in the glue. And again, if I could do this again, I would skip that extra glue. I would just do a bead of fabric glue to make sure he doesn't fall over. I don't know what it was about this glue that started eating away at the clay. I never had that happen before. Anyway, let's take a look at him. Here he is in a champagne glass. I think he turned out really cute. Let me know what you think. DIY 2, Father Time. I have here a Dollar Tree foam cone, but any foam cone will do. We're also going to need another one of those 2.4 foam balls. Again, I got these all at the Dollar Tree. And I am going to flatten one side of this. We're going to grab a handful of clay. I didn't color this clay. You know, it's white, comes white. So we're just going to knead it just like we did before and roll it out nice and flat. This was a good sized handful. I want to make sure I have enough flattened to cover the cone. Now I'm just going to roll that clay right around that cone and squeeze it till it's all meshed together. Yeah, I'm going to cut away some of this excess, I think. And I'm going to roll it on the table to smooth it out and make sure that it's well stuck to the foam. I used a candle jar lid to cut a circle. This is going to cover the bottom of them, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just I wanted to cover the foam on the bottom of the cone. So I'm just going to set the cone on top of that and work that clay until it's well stuck. Okay, I think this is pretty good. It's pretty smooth. So now we're going to work on his arms. I'm going to roll a log of clay. These are going to be his arms. Now, I only had a little bit of the Tawny clay left. That's why I didn't do his arms in Tawny. And to be honest, he's going to have sleeves which are mostly white. So it just made more sense to do it this way. We're going to cut this in half and size his arms. I'm going to push his arms into place. I didn't need to anchor these with a toothpick because they're not sticking up in the air. They're just going to lay across his body. So I'm just going to push them into place and make sure that they're well stuck. And just like I always do, I'm going to roll over the seam to incorporate it. To make his sleeves, I'm rolling more clay nice and flat, and I'm going to use a square fondant cutter to cut those out. Now I'm going to lay those squares right over his arms, leaving his hands visible. I'm just going to manipulate the clay so that it looks like a long, drapey sleeve. And once again, I'm incorporating it. We'll get the other sleeve on and incorporate it as well. Okay, right, so this is actually one of the 1.9 balls, and I'm going to cover this with what's left of my Tawny clay. And I'm going to do this the exact same way as I did for the baby. Now we're going to use a toothpick to anchor his head to the top of his body. And we're just going to slide that right into place. I want him to have slightly plumper cheeks than the baby version, so I'm rolling a small ball of clay. I'm going to cut it in half, which is going to give each half like a teardrop oval shape, which to me are perfect for cheeks. So we're just going to pop those onto his face. Push them on there, and we'll do a little bit of incorporating. For his nose, I'm going to make more of like a triangular shape with the clay, and I'm just going to pop that on. I think this is more of an adult looking nose, you know what I'm saying? So we'll incorporate that into place, just like we did with the other features. Now he's going to need some ears, so again, I'm flattening a wee bit of the Tawny clay. I'm going to punch out a circle, cut it in half, and we'll pop those onto the side of his head. I'm going to use my tool here to kind of mark out where I want his eyes to go because I don't want them to get lost in his beard, which we're going to make next. To make his hair and his beard, I'm going to roll some thin canes of clay, cut them to size, and place them all around his face. I'm going to start with a single strand right along the side of his ear here, drape it down the front. I'm going to give it kind of a V shape and pull the other end up over top of the other ear. So this first piece is one long strand. So I'm going to add this right alongside that first piece and just run it down to the bottom of the V, and I'll break it off there. I'll do this until the entire beard area is covered. I'm also going to use the canes of clay to go completely around the back of his head to give him, long old man hair, father time hair. You know what I'm saying. Now we're going to shape out a mustache with one of those canes of clay. I'm just going to give it, classic mustache shape, I guess. And we'll place that right under his nose at the top of his beard. Okay, just finishing up. That's pretty much it for the beard. So now that all of his hair and his beard are on, I'm going to set him aside overnight to dry. Okay, he's well dry. There's a look at the back of his head. You can see he's got hair completely around his head and a nice long beard. His robe, his hair, and his beard are all going to get 2 coats of Ceramcoat white. Even though the clay is already white, I like to add a couple of coats of white paint because it's a brighter white and it's just a nicer finish overall. Okay, I'm just painting in his robe I think you get the general idea. I don't really like to spend too much time on white paint because you really can't tell. So we'll move on. I'm going to paint what's showing of his hands with some of that tawny paint. That'll get 2 coats. And we're going to dry brush his cheeks and nose with the sun-kissed coral, just like we did for the baby. He's also going to get the raw sienna eyeline, and we'll give him some details on his ears. Now I'm going to come in and float around his face with these raw sienna, just like we did with the baby. Same exact way to load the brush. And we're just going to float anywhere where there would be a shadow. We'll shade his hands too. I'm going to use the back end of my paintbrush to dot on some eyebrows here. Just descending dots to give them, the bushy old man eyebrows. And this is just plain old white paint. He's going to get the same black dot eyes as the baby because after all, he is the grown version of the baby. So I wanted their faces to be very similar. We'll dot in some white highlights. I'm going to use some drizzle gray to float in some shading on his hair and also on his robe and of course his beard. And as I mentioned, I'm going to hold the paint corner of my brush wherever I want my darkest shadow to be. Now that all the painting's done, he's also going to get a top coat of the multi-purpose sealer. I'm using fabric glue to affix a little bit of that harlequin ribbon to the front of his robe. This way he kind of matches with the baby, although in the end you can't really see it, but still, I like to know it's there. I trim out the edges of the robe with some black and silver pipe cleaners that I've twisted together. I'm also going to trim the bottom of the robe with the pipe cleaners. He's Father Time, so he needs to be holding a clock. So I just printed out, a little midnight clock, added some garland to the back of it, and I'm going to glue it in between his hands. And this clock pretty much covers up all that ribbon I just added. But like I said, I know it's there. So that's what's important. Father Time is also going to get a little paper party hat that says Happy New Year. I just made this out of black cardstock, added some pipe cleaners to jazz it up. I'm going to use a little fabric glue, attach this to the center of his head. And this guy, Father Time, well, he's ready to retire. He's done his work. It's time for the baby to take over. I love the way he turned out. I think he's a pretty good representation of the baby grown into a full-grown adult. Let me know what you think. Here's the final reveal. Here's Baby New Year in his champagne glass, looking all excited and happy to ring in the new year. And here's Father Time, looking all happy, excited, and relieved to be ringing out the old year. I want to thank my buddy Dawn of Shabby Meets Bling and Jackie of Jackie Burns Creates for co-hosting. You'll find links to their channels in the description box, along with the playlist and a list of my supplies. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe, and all that good stuff. Thank you so much for hanging out with me all year long. You guys are great. I truly appreciate it. Have a very happy, healthy, and prosperous new year. I have lots of fun things in store for 2025. Stay creative, my friends. Thanks for hanging with me. See you next time. Up all night with Monica.